All right, Mary, thank you so much. Joining us now is NBC 10 Boston political commentator Sue O'Connell. Sue, right now, really all we have to go with are the polls. So can we take a look at the numbers of what we have right now? This is the Suffolk University NBC 10 Boston Boston Globe tracking poll. DeSantis, of course, out of the race. So now we're down to 2. Trump, after that, he went up 2 points since yesterday. But Haley went up after DeSantis dropped out by 2 points. So let's call that a wash. It's not that DeSantis had a lot of support here in New Hampshire, hence the reason he dropped out. But he is now supporting Trump. So is that going to have, do you think, any sway, at least here in New Hampshire?
You know, I actually think these poll numbers are solid. And the people who are answering them, we talked to David Paley-Logus, who the pollster over the weekend as well. These folks are solid. They're not moving. We're not going to see a lot of movement here. The question is going to be to the people who are not necessarily being polled, the independent voters, the first-time voters. Does DeSantis's endorsement of Trump mean something? Yes, absolutely. But again, he didn't have a big following here. There's not a lot of votes up for grabs. But it does kind of propel Trump forward to the next era. And it gives a division now, right? We've got Haley and we've got Trump, and everybody that's on Haley's side is on Haley's side, and Trump's side is Trump's side. So to Corey's Hunger Games, we're kind of at the final. They're all up at the very top, you know, fighting for the bounty.
You have to pick a camp.
Right.
Whose team?
Right.
I will correct you. Ryan Binkley is still in the race.
Right. I saw Ryan out in the lobby. He was following me around, and I couldn't remember his name.
He outlasted Asa Hutchinson in the debate, so we'll give him that. Let's stick with Ron DeSantis. A lot of ink has been spilled about just how much of a disaster his campaign was. And here's some numbers for you. He spent $130 million for all of 21,000 votes in Iowa. Is Nikki Haley in danger of doing the same thing, putting so much focus, so much money here in New Hampshire, only to not have any left for South Carolina and the primary calendar moving forward?
So there's two things, Corey, just to stay with our analogies. You don't want to leave anything on the field, right? So if Nikki Haley doesn't get through New Hampshire and she had money in the bank or she had support she could have used, that would be a travesty for her campaign. That would have been leaving, you know, a play, leaving the blood on the field and not going forward. The other thing that we keep not really talking about Nikki Haley in South Carolina, when we talk about, you know, her support from Governor Sununu, we talk about how a governor's institution and establishment is going to help her tomorrow to get the vote out. She was the governor of South Carolina, and a lot of South Carolinians went to Iowa to help. They're here in New Hampshire. So while she may not be making the kind of inroads that we're looking at in polls in South Carolina, she does have the infrastructure there from her political machine. We'll see if she does well tomorrow. If Wednesday morning we're talking about a Nikki Haley surge, there'll be more money, and then she can just plow into South Carolina. Trump is hitting her very hard in South Carolina, though. That's going to hurt her a little
He's
bit.
already been down there and come back. I just want to make one point about something some of the political analysts have been saying, that there aren't any new Trump voters, that basically there are those who have voted for Trump. They will vote for him again. The question is, can he sway those who hadn't before, especially now that we're just down to Nikki Haley? You spent a lot of time talking to voters here.
Yep.
Is anybody still, I know we have voters on the fence, but any feeling you have out there that Trump still can convince some of those people, especially because it's an open primary?
You know, I've been talking to voters, as we all have, JC, but I also listened to Heather Cox Richardson, the great Boston College historian who was on Kara Swisher's podcast this morning, and she said that this may be one of the few races in American history where the primary winner, or the winner of the delegates, the nominee, has no care in the world about convincing other people to vote for him. It's as if he's just happy with his, what will probably be 30% of the general electorate, and has no intention of changing his message or doing anything different in order to get more voters in the general election. She also warned that, you know, in America, this is how democracy falls at the ballot box, not at the gates. So it was a very sobering conversation that I listened to, but Trump is showing no desire to convert anybody, so we're not going to see that happen.
Okay.
All right. Sue, as always, thank you so much for your insight. I know you're going to be here for the rest of the night.